There's a great gospel saying, "The truth will set you free." We know that, but it's equally true that the truth can make us very uncomfortable. Maybe if you're an ordinary church member, you've not thought too much about this, but it takes courage to stand to preach the gospel Sunday by Sunday. It requires even more courage to preach the truth when the Bible is clearly wrong or mistaken, or when the church has gone astray. The new Pope, Francis, has a very high level of courage in tackling issues his predecessor, Benedict, didn't want to face. In our tiny little Methodist church in New Zealand, we've had people of similar courage in the past. But it's a bit of a paradox. Justice and fair play may be just as hard to achieve in a micro-church as in a massive organisation like Roman Catholicism. One of the outstanding New Zealand Wesleyan clergy of the 19th century was R Fitchett. The harsh Methodist discipline of being moved from station to station every few years eventually wore him down. On one last occasion, he had the courage to refuse to move. The church he had served not only loyally, but with considerable vigour and charm, didn't respond well. When he was confronted in 1878 with the necessity of another move, he rebelled. No mercy or understanding was shown him. His personal ties to Dunedin were now too strong for him to break for a second time. Fitchett made no public fuss in the church about this. He simply announced in a speech after morning worship that he would no longer submit to the discipline of Methodist stationing. He now felt this, quote, to be an absolutely intolerable law. The next day, the Otago Daily Times reprinted his resignation speech in full. It also offered some pertinent advice. Fitchett ought not to leave Dunedin, they said, but to stay where he had many friends. This indeed was his course of action. Within a few months he was ordained an Anglican priest by Bishop Neville. Subsequently, Fitchett became Dean of the Cathedral. He stood his ground. Most people were in sympathy, but the Methodists didn't budge. Oh, what about today? Surely we've moved beyond all those old-fashioned disciplines. Well, I don't think so. The same old procedures and the same old rules have been misapplied down the generations. So what? We know that's true, but it's hardly newsworthy. But there's more to Fitchett's story. What's far more relevant is Fitchett having the courage of his convictions that he proved he had in a far more significant way just 2 years before. And the Otago Daily Times praised his stance back then also. What happened was that Fitchett stood up for his belief in the theory of evolution as proposed by Charles Darwin. Fitchett stood up to the fact that the book of Genesis told great stories, but they were myths, not historical facts. And Fitchett was pilloried in the church and by sections of the New Zealand public for his beliefs, but he continued to hold his ground, and truth was his ally. So I don't think he was even saddened, let alone surprised by Methodism's intransigence on stationing. He had already learnt much harder life lessons, much more significant life lessons, about standing up for truth, no matter what. I'm quite inspired by Fitchett, and indeed a number of others like him from that era of our history. So we can ask, how might John Wesley's helpers today show similar courage? Simply, I think, by standing up for human rights and dignity in every circumstance. When the Bible says no to that, the Bible's wrong. That might mean facing the critics one by one, small group by small group, synod by synod, conference by conference, all the time asking the hard questions about what the truth is. It can be exhilarating. It can get you into hot water. But believe me, that help keeps your conscience clean. Only by asking what the truth is can we ever really be set free. I'm glad that John put that saying into his gospel. Join me next week when we look at another minister who pursued the truth, Charles Garland. Garland's ghosts continue to haunt Methodism today. See you then, and thanks for watching.